Hello, everyone. Hello. Oh, stay seated. Stay seated. I'm sure we're going to high five you all. Oh my gosh.
You remember? I do.
I'm going to forget. Thank you for being here. Oh, it's warm water. I highly recommend running for president because then everyone gives you water.
So we have a gentleman from Esquire magazine here too.
So if you say something really pithy, it might
Make sure you spell your name properly. So Andrew is a Phillips Exeter guy, so he has a little bit of a New Hampshire connection. He went to Brown. He's a lawyer. Nobody's perfect, but and
I'll agree. I was an unhappy lawyer for 5 months. Don't hold it against me.
and he's a high-tech guy, and also started Venture for America. Is that correct?
Yes.
Which is like a fellowship for entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And so this is really our editorial board. Usually we have this upstairs, which is our reporters. And there's Margaret, the editor. There's Damon. There's Lloyd. There's Terry. So this is our staff. So so what we can do is let our staff ask a question or two, and then we'll just open it up to you guys. And Andrew's very, he's got a lot of interesting ideas. And certainly his keystone idea is about income disparity and what artificial intelligence is going to do to us.
Yes.
So take it away.
Oh, well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming together. It's a pleasure to be here. I did graduate Phillips Exeter in 1992, so coming back to New Hampshire, they actually had me come speak at my alma mater last month, which was a joy. So I'm running for president because I think the reason why Donald Trump's in the White House is different than what the media has been saying. And if you listen to the media, I think the main explanations you're getting right now would be something like Russia, racism, FBI, Facebook, some combination. And what I believe is that the reason he's our president is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all the swing states he needed to win and did win. And I know there are many communities here in New Hampshire that lost their manufacturing jobs in previous years, a little bit earlier than the Midwest. But now my friends in Silicon Valley, and I have a bunch of them, know that what we did to the manufacturing jobs, we're now going to do to the retail jobs, the call center jobs, the fast food jobs, and most disastrously, the truck driving jobs. And being a truck driver is the most common job in 29 states. How many of you all have noticed stores closing around where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon. That's right. Amazon is soaking up $20 billion in business a year, and now it's pushing 30% of Main Street stores and malls to close here in the United States. What's the most common job in the United States? Retail. Well, working as a cashier is the most common job in the U.S. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman making between $10 and $12 an hour. So if 30% of malls close, many of those people lose their jobs, and you know that there aren't going to be other stores hiring, and that most Americans at this point don't have massive savings cushions to make adjustments. Now, how much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. Zero, that's right. Less than you all. And I'm going to suggest that there's something messed up when a $1 trillion company that's soaking up $20 billion in additional business every year pays zero in taxes. And it's not their fault, it must be our fault. Their fault is to hire the smartest accountants they can and say, like, let's pay zero taxes if we can. And it's our job to make that impossible. So my plan is to get the money back from the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks of the world that's getting spirited up into the cloud, away from your communities here in New Hampshire, and return it to you all in the form of a dividend. Now, if you're here today, you probably heard this about me. There's an Asian guy running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000.
And her dog too.
We thought you were giving it today.
That's why you're here. I think I have some books. But those things are true. And the $1,000 a month dividend, it seems far out, but if you look at our country's history, Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country, called it the citizens' dividend. Martin Luther King was for it, called it a guaranteed minimum income in 1967. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists signed a study saying this would be tremendous for America. It passed the House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. And one state has had a dividend for 37 years, and now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. And what state is that?
Alaska.
And how do they pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Information.
Technology, data, AI, software, self-driving cars and trucks. That stuff's about to take off in a very, very serious way. AI has been hyped up for years, but now it's about to get real. There's a guy out west named Andrew Ng who's a Stanford guy, and he says AI is going to be the new electricity. Now, the example I try and use for people is like, look, AI, it's a little hard to understand. When you call some company right now and you get like a bot trying to answer your phone call, you're like, let me get rid of this. Let me try and get to a human, because the bot's super annoying. Am I right? Human. In about 3 years, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between the software and a person. It's going to pick up the phone and be like, hey, how's it going? What can I do for you? He's like, oh, I need this. And then we'll do it. Now, on the flip side, again, you have 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers, making $14 an hour. And so AI, that's one use case for AI that's very obvious. But AI is going to also upend things like accounting, bookkeeping, corporate law. Like my old job, I guarantee you a lot of that can be automated. It's one reason I left that job. I mean, I didn't leave it because I thought it could be automated. I just didn't like the work. But a lot of it can be automated. So this doesn't seem like it's not like a robot's going to walk in to this meeting right now and say, I'm here to take your job. That's not the way it works. The way it works is that AI displaces humans from some back office process, but then cumulatively, that's a disaster for many, many people. So I realized all of this. Donald Trump becomes president. I'm like, why are we not talking about the fact that we're in the third inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of the country, the fourth industrial revolution? Why are people not talking about the fact that Donald Trump's not the cause, he's a symptom. He's a manifestation. And so I started going to folks around DC and saying, what are we going to do about the fact that we're pushing more and more Americans to the sideline and that people are getting hurt and it's tearing us apart? And the answers I got from the folks in DC were somewhere between disappointing and horrifying, truly. Like when I went in there and I was like, what are we going to do? And I wrote a book about, I have all the facts and figures saying like, look, this is what's happening. And the responses I got were literally, we cannot talk about that. We should study that. And the third one, the most popular, was we must educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future. And I said, I looked at the numbers around retraining. You all want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs were for manufacturing workers?
0 to 15%?
Yeah, 0 to 15%. That's right. This man's heard me speak before. I must do a good job if he was willing to travel to see me speak again. So it's 0 to 15%, and we all know this in real life. But what most people don't dig into is that about half of displaced manufacturing workers left the workforce and never worked again. And of that group, half filed for disability. And you may know people who resemble this. And then the suffering picks up. America's life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years because of a surge in suicides and drug overdoses, where now 8 Americans are dying of drugs every hour. It is unheard of in a developed country to have your life expectancy decline for even 1 year, let alone 3 years in a row. You all want to know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row?
Civil War.
The Spanish flu of 1918. We're actually in Spanish flu territory again, but it's because of economic ruin and despair and drugs that the feds helped turn a blind eye to for years as well, and that's a whole other set of issues. So I went to Washington, D.C., and I came away, and there's a guy in D.C., and I'm not making this up, I wish I was, and I had a staffer with me so that he can verify that this is what someone said to me. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. None of us are going to do anything about what you're talking about because Washington, D.C. is not a town of leaders, it's a town of followers. And the only way we would do anything about what you're describing is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring it crashing down on our heads. And I looked at him, and I was, again, somewhere between horrified and like grateful. And then I thought to myself, challenge accepted. And that is why I'm here with you all today. I'm here with you all because we need to wake up our fellow citizens and Americans to the fact that it is not immigrants that are causing economic dislocations. It's technology and automation that's now accelerating to a point where it's pushing millions of Americans to the sideline. And that's what this campaign's about. And then when you land there, then you realize something like $1,000 a month out of, I'm going to call it the tech check. In Alaska, they call it the oil check, and they love it. We're going to call this the tech check, and you're all going to love it. And so then the tech check of $1,000 a month, what does that do in real life? Where would you spend the money after I'm president, and then this dividend starts going out? Like, where does that money go? Yeah.
Property taxes.
Yeah, some of it. So some of it goes to property taxes. Some of it goes back to Jeff Bezos and the gang because you maybe buy an extra toaster on Amazon. But most of it stays right here in your community. It goes to car repairs and home repairs you've been putting off, and tutoring and food for your kids, and the occasional night out. And so that money circulates over and over again. This is what I call the trickle-up economy, from people and families and communities up. And this $1,000 a month dividend, it sounds dramatic, but it is the only way we're going to rebalance the economy for rural areas, for parts of New Hampshire, and across different industries. Because we know the government's not going to be nimble and proactive enough to figure out what's going on in so many different industries so quickly. Bain is projecting, Bain's a big fancy consulting firm that some of my friends work for, but Bain's projecting that this is going to be 3 to 4 times faster than the first industrial revolution in terms of the number of workers it displaces. Do you all think the government's going to be able to figure that out? Of course not.
Who's going to pay for it, Andrew?
So the way we pay for it, again, you have 0 taxes from Amazon, 0 taxes from Netflix, Google, very, very low taxes, and that is not an anomaly. Like, Amazon's tax rate for its entire lifetime is 3%. So what you have to do is you have to devise a system that actually gets Americans their fair share. And so what we need to do is we need to join every other advanced economy in the world and have a value-added tax that would then get the American public a sliver of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile, and bring it all to you. And then again, that money would end up circulating through the economy. So this value-added tax, I'm suggesting, would raise about $800 billion, and that's at half the European level. It's not even very extreme in the scheme of things. And so that $800 billion, plus the economic growth from all the money being in your hands, getting spent in your communities, plus cost savings on things like incarceration and homelessness services and emergency room care. When I was in New Hampshire on a previous trip, a corrections officer said we should pay people to stay out of jail because we spend so much when they're in jail. And then the fact that you'd be making your population stronger, healthier, better educated. How many of you all are educators? There are. Yes. So you know that putting resources into the family's hands will improve the kids' ability to learn. It'll give them better nutrition, give them a better shot at higher graduation rates, better mental health, higher productivity. There was one study that showed if you were to alleviate poverty in the U.S., you'd increase GDP by $700 billion just based on better education and health outcomes. So that's how we get the money, is you pass this tax that's going to harvest the gains for new innovations.
Would we be paying that tax?
Yeah, the people of New Hampshire, I'm glad to say, would be net winners to the tune of $8 billion a year. And so you got to go where the money is. And the money right now is getting hoarded in the hands of a relatively small number of people. So in the case of the people here, let's say I were to increase your prices by like 5%, which would be realistic, and you're getting $12,000 a year, you literally need to spend $250,000 a year to somehow end up losing. And there are very, very few people in most parts of the country that are spending over $250,000 a year. But then the magic kicks in when you have someone like Jeff Bezos, who's worth $160 billion. He spends $1 billion a year on his space exploration company. I don't know if you knew that. Blue Origin, yeah. So he's spending $1 billion. Like, that's where the money is, and then that's where we get the money. We're not coming to New Hampshire to get the money. We're going to where the money is.
Andrew? Hi, I'm Margaret. I'm the editor. So, just to play devil's advocate for Sean Hannity, if you will, who
Sure.
last night seemed to make you the villain of the world, and your plan is going to change America for the worse forever. So, I'm going to harken back to when I was on unemployment for about 6 months when I was 20 years old, and basically getting paid to do nothing. I did nothing. I watched TV all night, I slept in. I wasn't motivated to do anything, and then once the money ran out, I went out and got a job and got into journalism, and the rest is history. So I'm going to suggest to you, like, if you're paying people $1,000 a month, how do you know it will make their lives better? Maybe they will spend it on drugs. Maybe they will just sit around and do nothing. How do we make their lives better with that money?
Yeah, so I'm happy to say that when we put money into people's hands, there are two groups of people that have worked less. New mothers who spend more time with their kids, and teenagers who graduate from high school at higher levels. Other than that, work levels have remained constant. And if you think about it for a second, that actually makes sense. Because people want to work. It's not like $1,000 a month, unless you're, a young person at a particular stage in life. Like $1,000 a month is not enough to thrive for anyone under just about any circumstances. The poverty line in the United States is $12,770 a year. So you're looking at putting an amount of money in that's going to make a positive difference into people's hands, but everyone's still going to have the same challenges they have right now, which is they wake up and think, okay, like how am I going to try and get ahead, improve my life, and get the resources I need to have the kind of life that I want for myself and my family. Like nothing really changes on that level.
Andrew, thank you for coming. And I guess my question would be is if you succeed and we get our $1,000 a month, I was wondering if the boss might cut my pay by $1,000 a month, or the landlord might increase my rent by $1,000 a month. Everybody would want a piece of the $1,000.
Well, the great thing is you work here at the paper, right?
I do.
Yeah. So first, let me say what I said to the staff out there is that local journalism serves a vitally important role in communities around the country. And we all know that over 1,200 newspapers have gone out of business in the last number of years because they relied upon classified ads and just disappeared into the internet. And so I have proposals to try and help support local journalism in different ways, because if you believe in democracy, you have to believe in local journalism. How are you going to vote if you don't get any information? So I say this in part to suggest to you that your employer is actually going to be stronger because in a community where everyone has more money, then local newspaper actually has like more robust advertising and like more business concerns that are trying to reach the citizens. So on that level, your employer is actually going to be like, oh, I might actually be able to keep your salary higher or even give you a raise, which I'm sure in this context would be very, very hard right now because you need a certain amount of growth to be giving people raises. Now the great thing about this $1,000 a month is it actually runs the other direction. It makes people harder to push around and kick around. It makes it harder to exploit workers, because right now, how many people are stuck in jobs that they know they need to survive and the boss knows it? And the boss is like, hey, if I treat you like dirt, you kind of have to take it because you lose this job, you have no savings, you're not going to be able to survive. Then if you have $1,000 a month coming in, you'd be like, if you treat me like dirt, I actually might go someplace else and that doesn't treat me like dirt. I mean, we're all people. This helps activate the economy in ways that make it work for us. And that's true also for landlords, where if a landlord tries to stick it to you, then you'd be like, well, I can vote with my feet, I can go someplace else, and there'll be other landlords that, aren't trying to gouge you in that way. Or with this $1,000 a month too, you might even get together with a few people and be like, among the three of us, that's like $3,000 a month. We might be able to rent a house together or do something a little bigger. So it increases the dynamism and flexibility of us, and actually makes it harder to exploit us rather than easier.
So is this taxable income?
Yes. The $12,000 is not taxable, but it's possible that it pushes your income up into a range that it is taxable, because again, the presumption is that most people will still be working and having an income of some kind.
Andrew's time is limited. Does anybody else have any question on this? Because we'll move on.
I want to spend more time, yeah.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Have you considered income banding this so that wealthy people don't get it, or is your thought give it to everybody and then nobody can complain?
Bezos? It's very much the latter, and I'm going to explain to you a few reasons why. So, in my plan, Jeff Bezos would literally be paying billions of dollars into the system. And so if we send him $1,000 a month, just to remind him he's still an American, you know, it's probably a win. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to have a situation where people see it as like a rich to poor transfer, or like a, oh, you're getting it and I'm paying for it, or oh, your circumstances change, or you want to underreport your income so it's below a certain level so you qualify. You want to get rid of all of that administration and stigmatization. And the fact is, again, the way it's designed, we're going to get so much out of the people at the top of the pyramid that we don't care about sending them $1,000 a month. And if, you know, some of them will be like, I don't need the $1,000 a month, because it is opt-in. You do have to like sign up for it and whatnot. And so the goal is that we can make it so that this is the new right of citizenship. That this is not like a, hey, and one of the problems with the current programs is that of the current programs, many of them give you less if you start doing better. And so the incentive then is to either like not do that well, or if you do better, then just like don't tell them, the government, or don't tell anyone. So we can remove all of those incentives. You know, a friend of mine, his sister was on disability, and she was afraid to volunteer in her community because she was afraid that someone would say, oh, you're able-bodied, and then you lose disability payments. So those are the kinds of incentives that we can get rid of if we just make this a blanket right, and it removes all the stigma.
What age do you have to be to receive your check?
Kicking in at age 18, and then it applies forever. So wouldn't that be great to be able to say to our young people, we actually care about you? Like, you know, when you turn 18, you're getting $1,000 a month, you have like some kind of bridge to the future. I mean, right now we tell them you can vote. Like half of them are like, whatever, like that's garbage. You know what I mean? Like this would make citizenship actually much, much more meaningful.
So I've been reading about this for years, and it doesn't really, it's not something that's going to change my vote. But one of the things that I like about when I listen to your ideas is that I think you're a little bit ahead of where Washington is. I think a lot of people are going to lose jobs. I'm fine. I grew up in the perfect time in our country. But the people behind me, maybe not so much. So what I would like to see is something put in place so when these 29 million truck drivers, or whatever your number you said, don't have jobs anymore, and no one has thought about that in any capacity. I want some people to think about it. And my question is, are you getting any traction? Because anybody I talk to about you or about the idea just dismisses it 100% from the beginning, because how can we possibly do it? You know, we're $22 trillion in debt, how can we possibly do it? So are you finding any traction with your idea?
So I'm very happy to say that I've already cleared the threshold to be included in the Democratic primary debates. So I'll be in the debates in both. We've raised over $1 million in small donations since mid-February. Increments of only $19 each. So my fans are even cheaper than Bernie's. But I've got a lot of them. And so if you look at any of the mainstream press, all of them have just recently woken up. You know, Morning Joe, 538, New York Times, Washington Post, like all have just done a profile on me saying, Andrew Yang is now officially a major candidate, and we need to recognize that and then start having him on. So we're talking to CNN about a town hall, but this campaign is growing. I'm a numbers guy. This campaign is growing by leaps and bounds every day. We're getting tens of thousands of dollars in donations from thousands of Americans around the country, and the people that are donating are people like you all. Like, they're just people who are looking up. They see that Washington is way behind the curve. They're saying, you know what, we have to do something to catch us up. And you know, we all know it. Like, it's gone from being like embarrassing to dangerous how behind the curve Washington is. They have no idea what's coming. They're operating as if we're still in like a 1980s type of economy when that was 30 or 40 years ago.
Do you think any of your fellow Democratic candidates for president are going to pick up this this idea as well?
I believe so. You know, because I think...
Anybody called you?
You can tell that some of them are tiptoeing around it and testing it. And one of the things, if you go to my website, you'll see I have 75 policy proposals. So it's not just the freedom dividend. I'm for universal health care. I'm for updating our economic measurements to recognize my wife's work. What I mean by that is she's at home with our 2 children, one of whom is autistic. And what is her work valued at in GDP right now? 0. What is the market value of her work at? 0. And you know that's perverse and nonsense. We know that that's exactly the most important work that's being done. And if the Democratic Party in particular is going to be about empowering women, there are thousands of women in exploitative and abusive jobs and relationships, and millions who are doing work that our market recognizes at zero or near zero, that would be able to improve their situations and improve their lives and improve their work if they were getting $1,000 a month. So we can talk about female empowerment and we can do something about it. And I want to do something about it.
I'd love to get your impressions in New Hampshire. I know you've been all around at this point.
Sure. I mean, again, I went to high school here. Like, I love it here because you all are the real deal when it comes to democracy. Like, when you go to other parts of the country, they don't think their votes matter that much. They see these pipes that are just clogged full of money. And they're right. Their votes don't matter that much. And the pipes are clogged full of money. But you come here, and the people in New Hampshire realize that if 50,000 of you get activated around a vision for a different kind of economy, we can make it real like that. And the political culture here is so developed that you're not comparing me to the other candidates this cycle. You're comparing me to candidates that you saw like 4, 8, 10, 12, 20 years ago in some cases. I was at a house party speaking to a group of New Hampshire voters, and then one person said Barack Obama stood exactly where you're standing 10 years ago. And then you realize you're just walking, walking down like pathways of history. And that's true in New Hampshire, like it's true nowhere else.
Would you get rid of the Electoral College?
I think that...
why are the Democrats jumping on that?
The Electoral College has been in effect more or less since the founding of the country. It's been in effect for decades. And I think if you were to get rid of it, you would have very, very different looking elections where candidates would not go to small towns. They would just go to big cities and major media markets because you can just get to more voters faster just based upon reach. And so that Democrats, I mean, the entire, everyone's vote should count, just whoever gets more votes wins. It's appealing on a certain logical sense. But I would say it's unprincipled for Democrats to pursue this after losing 2 elections on this basis in a relatively recent past. Because, if you lose elections by a certain rule set, your job is to win elections by that rule set. It is not to change the rules so you can win.
Lloyd?
Andrew, when you become president, as commander-in-chief, what are you going to do for our military and our veterans? What are your thoughts on that? Are we in too many wars? Are we spending too much money? Are you bringing the troops home? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm for a much more restrained and judicious approach to our military interventions and foreign policy generally. I would push the ability to declare military interventions back to Congress where it belongs, the Constitution. Like that sort of gravitated to the president over the last number of years, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. We've spent over $1 trillion, cost thousands of American lives in conflicts that have had very unclear achievements. We've deluded ourselves into thinking we could accomplish certain things that we probably could not. And so I would try and end this forever war or a string of wars. Right now, I'm not sure most Americans know where we're fighting at any given point in time. And that also is not the way it has historically been. And so we need to become more clear-eyed about what we can and can't do. Certainly when we bring people home, we need to put the right resources in place. My brother's a psychology professor, and right now 22 soldiers and veterans are committing suicide on a daily basis. And we need to do much, much better than that. And that begins at every stage. So one, you don't send people into conflict unless there's a very, very clear objective and a clear timeline of what to achieve. Number 2, you send them in with the right resources and equipment. Number 3, when they come home, you have the right resources in place to help support them. Number 4, you have to do more to try and reintegrate vets into society. So one thing I've already signed off on is that we need to have military credentials apply in the civilian world. Where if you were, for example, like a waste disposal person in the military, you come back to the U.S. and then no one recognizes that credential, even though you might have spent months or years doing it. And so we need to help those credentials translate into the civilian sector.
What about gun control? The New Zealand Prime Minister instituted a ban on assault rifles, and the NRA here said in response, well, they don't have a Second Amendment. What would you do about gun control, if anything?
So the gun issue is very, very difficult because Americans feel so strongly on both sides. I'm on the side where I think we need to find a zone of agreement with responsible gun owners to try and curb access to certain types of weapons that can kill lots of people in a short period of time in the public setting. I'm more on the gun safety side. Some of the things I would propose would be like a voluntary buyback that's in effect all the time to try and reduce the supply of guns in a market-friendly way. I'd also be for, and this sounds kind of high-tech, for complementary upgrading of guns to signature guns that only you can fire, which makes your gun cooler because it's personalized, but it also makes us all safer because then if that gun goes into someone else's hands, they can't do anything with it. So I'm all for pursuing any kind of gun safety measures that we can get agreement on legislatively, but it's a very tough issue because there are many Americans who feel very strongly, about access to firearms.
What's the biggest misconception about you, would you say?
I think the biggest misconception about me is that that I'm anything other than what I am, which I'm just like an American, just like you all, like a patriot and a parent who just looked up and said, what is going on? And then I decided to do something about it, and I had this faith in our country that I could actually make a difference. And I have to say that faith is being borne out. It's like a beautiful feeling. But I think because I started something with venture in its name, people think I'm like some Silicon Valley venture capitalist. I spent the last 6.5 years working with young people who wanted to be entrepreneurs because I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I was in my 20s, and my first company failed. And I remember that very, very vividly. I still owed $100,000 in educational loans, which I want to forgive a lot of, by the way, because that stuff's totally messed up too. Like the fact we're up to $1.5 trillion in school loans. Anyway, that stuff's such a disaster. We're essentially like throwing this like huge anchor on top of the next generation and like trapping them in their parents' homes and saying that's moral. So I remember my 1,000 of law school loans. And the biggest misconception about me is that I'm somehow like shinier than I am. It's like I've got 2 young kids, 6 and 3. Like I wake up to a lot of the same things that other Americans do.
Dinner with any 3 people throughout history, who would you like to have dinner with?
First people that come to mind are like Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, and Franklin Roosevelt. Those are the 3 that came to mind. I'm actually Teddy Roosevelt's great-granddaughter's godfather. I know, it's very confusing. But that's what happens when you go to Phillips Exeter.
Thank you.
Tom?
Hi, Tom Easton of the Conway Daily Sun. But you said about universal health care. Are you hearing on the campaign trail, is health care the #1 issue that you're hearing, and what is your proposal other than universal health care?
Healthcare is the most consistent issue because everyone feels strongly about it, and most everyone realizes that our current system is the worst of all worlds, where we're spending twice as much to worse results. When Americans get sick or injured, we're more stressed out about paying for it or navigating the system than we are getting well. And we've almost gotten accustomed to this terrible system that we have. But now Americans are waking up to the fact that maybe we can improve it. And the thing that drives me nuts about the conversation around universal health care is when people ask where the money is. We spend 18% of GDP on it already. Like, there's so much waste in the system, it is staggering. And we all know this intuitively because we know that our healthcare system is not designed around things that would make us healthier. It's designed around revenue. And you go there and you know that the practice has financial incentives wrapped up with activity. Where they send you home and say, you're okay, keep an eye on it. They get paid less than if they're like, hey, let's send you get a test, let's do this procedure. Let's it's one reason why the opiate epidemic happened, is that there are financial incentives attached to everything. So the fact that people are saying we don't have the money to pay for it is actually the reverse. We're going to be able to save so much money, get the cost down so much faster, and broaden access so quickly. we almost can't help but do that because the system is so broken right now.
So you're saying the government's going to be better able to manage it than the private sector at this point?
I wouldn't say the government's better able to manage it, but I will say that if you have an entity that says, look, look, $5,000 for an ambulance ride, like, isn't appropriate, and guess what? I represent 75% of your customers, so now it's going to be $500. And then, you don't need to be like an extraordinary, economist to look up and say, like, wait, why is that ambulance ride like $5,000 to $10,000? Why is that? Why are the sutures $200? Like, why is the costs in the system are just so out of whack.
How are we going to pay for that?
Yeah, and then you're like, how are you going to pay for it? It's like, well, maybe maybe that drug doesn't need to be $300. Margaret generally doesn't.
So I covered Beto yesterday, and one of his sound bites is that young people are not the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of today. And he was asked, how do you get the millennial vote? So I would ask you, do you have any plans to include them in your campaign, and how do you, other than a freedom dividend, how do you get the millennial vote?
Well, I think I've been labeled the internet candidate. And I have to say that young people spend a lot of time on the internet. And, our ability to galvanize young people is going to be very, very high. And it's going to be very, very strong. And so, I'm not that much older than, I'm older than obviously the people we're talking about. But one of the jokes I tell is like, nothing like running for president to make you seem young. So I think we're going to be able to activate a lot of young people.
Is there anything that Donald Trump has done that you can support or think that he's done a good job with?
I think Donald Trump has done a great job of calling out some of the problems. And I think Donald Trump has done a great job of saying, look, sometimes the institutions don't have it right, and that sometimes there's a need for a new approach. So yeah, he's done some things that objectively I think could prove very, very valuable to American people.
Well, if you could just let us answer a couple more questions.
What are we here for? If you're not going to let us ask questions. This is supposed to be a public event, please. Give attention to some other folks.
Well, it was kind of, I don't want to really argue with you, but it was kind
I got my tickets online.
If you could just,
Sure,
there'll be
please,
time,
go
you can just let our staff ask a few more questions, and then I'm sure Andrew will be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was going to ask about, I'll let you pick, climate change, political correctness on the internet.
I'll go with climate change. I'd say it's a much bigger problem. So the last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history. So it does not take any scientist to say that climate change is accelerating. And it's an existential threat to our way of life. Now, I believe that climate change and this financial insecurity I'm describing are actually hand in hand. Because if you have an American, 78% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, 57% can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. And so what you have is a mindset of scarcity where you're just trying to figure out how to make ends meet in any given month. And then if you go to that person and say, hey, we need to worry about climate change, they'll look at you and say, I can't pay my bills. Like, the penguins can wait in line. And that sounds harsh, but that's just where a lot of Americans are. Now, here's the magic. We can actually control our capital flows much more easily and powerfully than we can control just about anything else. Like, this $1,000 dividend I'm talking about, all we need is a majority of Americans to get on board, and we can make it happen like that. We can reverse this mindset of scarcity that is crippling so many of our people, and then restore it with a mindset of abundance, of optimism. And then you go back to the same person and you say, we need to worry about climate change. They'll look at their child and say, yes, we do. And then you can use this getting the boot off of people's throats as an accelerant toward trying to address climate change. So I'm for rejoining the Paris Accord, I'm for a carbon tax and dividend, I'm for investing billions and billions of dollars in a more sustainable and resilient infrastructure. But the brutal truth is that the United States of America is only 15% of global emissions, and a lot of this conversation acts like we're 100%. Like, if we cut back our emissions, then climate change will reverse itself. it will probably just slow the rate incrementally. And at this point, the carbon levels are high enough where we have to go to geoengineering methods like carbon capture and sequestration and other things that are actually going to mitigate the worst effects. It's not like if we all recycle a little more assiduously and make some changes, then like the Earth's just going to like stop warming. So unfortunately, it's a massive problem. We do need to go big, but we also have to be realistic about what we can accomplish.
Good. Sir, you're on.
Sure. What would your policy changes be towards U.S. handling of immigration and refugees?
Yes. So I'm the son of immigrants. My father generated 69 U.S. patents for GE and IBM over his career, so I have this strong feeling that immigrants are positive for the country. That said, I'm for enforcing a strong southern border, and we have to try and improve our systems right now, because right now there are over 12 million people who are undocumented in this country, and like we don't know who anyone is. So there are three approaches you could have to the people who are here and undocumented. The first is you pretend you can deport them, and it's totally unrealistic to deport that number of people. It would collapse regional economies. It would separate families. It would just be a non-starter on many levels. Number two is our current approach, which is to do nothing. And that causes massive problems too, because they get into car accidents and show up at schools and hospitals and interact with our institutions in various ways. So number three would be some kind of long-term path to citizenship, that if you pay taxes, keep a clean criminal record, and adhere to the process, then we give you a path forward. Now, no matter what path you create, a significant proportion of them will not join it because they just don't trust anything the government does. You know, like they just never find out about it even. But that to me is the best approach, and that is an approach that Marco Rubio and other Republicans supported before they thought that the politics went negative for them on it. Because everyone who looks at this knows that again, it's unfeasible to deport, and the 12 million number is probably too low. I mean, the real number is probably significantly higher than that. So we need to start facing facts and having a more realistic approach, in my opinion.
Many people feel that campaign finance reform should be the #1 issue, because until the money is pulled out of the politics, it's going to be very difficult to solve serious problems. So I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on campaign finance reform.
Yes. This is one of my favorite topics because it's such a huge, pressing problem, and it's so easy to solve. So most Democrats you talk to are going to be like this: overturn Citizens United, get corporate money out of politics, and then you have this like nagging feeling. You're like, I don't think it's going to do the trick. And you're right, because the same people still have the money, the same companies will still have the money. So here's the reality of running for office. And where's Steve Marchand? Steve? Here?
Around the corner.
Oh, he's around the corner. So Steve can speak to this. So the problem in American politics right now is you can get people behind you, then you have to go someplace else for the money. So I can get 10,000 people in the state of New Hampshire behind me, and then I'm like, okay, like, where's the money at? And then maybe I have to go crawling to some rich person or corporation and be like, hey, can you like donate money? And it's soul crushing. It's corruptive. It's terrible. So here's how you fix it. As president in 2021, I will pass the Democracy Dollars Act, which will put $100 in democracy dollars into all of your hands every year that you can give to any political candidate you want. Use it or lose it. So if you don't use it, it disappears, and then you get $100 new next year. So what this would do is this would mean if I get 10,000 people behind me, that's $1 million. And then if the company comes crawling and is like, hey, I have 20,000 for you, like, I don't care. I don't care about your corporate money. If I get the people behind me, then I get the money behind me, and then I can actually do right by my people. Because right now, politicians' incentives are completely distorted and corrupt. And so how do you align it? You actually match the people up with the money. And it is much, much easier for us to give you all 100 democracy dollars than it is for me to somehow enforce regulations trying to keep corporate money out. Using democracy dollars, we can flush out the corporate money. Because I did the math, and with the democracy dollars, the people would have many times more than all of the corporate lobbyists combined.
Building off of that, so a big problem to me that I see is going to be verifying the vote in a lot of states that have digital voter machines. I think we need like backup printed ballots so we can verify it. And that's going to be another thing, because even if we are getting to the money to the right people, can we be sure that they're not going to be tampered with, because there's proprietary software in a lot of these machines, and these companies don't want us to look at them because it's their software.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. I mean, we're in 2019, and I agree with you that the paper backup is in many cases the most reliable. And then if you go to someone, you just be like, hey, like, what does the paper say? So there may be a period during this time that we have something of like overlapping or redundant processes. It could be that we only do it in states that we frankly know are going to be kind of like contested and tough, and you know, we might have some shenanigans going on to keep it under control. But I agree with you that having a paper backup is key for the time being.
Sorry to go again, but I find it extremely important because Trump won last time, and he was already saying that there was fraud anyway. So if somebody wins next time, I guarantee he's going to say that there was fraud involved. And he's not going to go silently into the night.
Yeah, and it's a tough time where like Americans mistrust our own democracy and our own processes. But that is where we are. I mean, there's not a lot of trust left. So we're going to have to find ways to make it so that the results are transparent enough so that Americans are like, okay, I get it. Like, someone won fair and square. But it's going to be a challenge. I agree. Yeah.
Along the same lines, in regards to voter registration, domicile, and all revolving around, because we've seen it in other states and we've seen it within our own state. And I know my daughter's in college, and it's a particularly important issue to her, is people are, young especially, people of color are being purposely pushed out and made difficult to vote, period, because of these laws. And what are you going to do on a national level to improve that situation? Because I know we're pushing it on the states, but it seems like more needs to be done.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a real problem where there are various rules and regs being pushed out that make it harder for certain groups, particularly young people, particularly people of color in some environments, to vote meaningfully. And so to the extent the federal government can help by putting resources to work, I would love to do that. I have friends who are working on that problem, I'm happy to say, and they're sad too, that they see that some of the rules are kneecapping various people from voting, but I would love to do more.
You identified, back to healthcare, you identified that roughly $1.10 in our entire economy is being wasted, and if we were able to stop that, there's a terrific advantage. But the catch is that that's a lot of money that's going into somebody's pocket.
Yeah.
And healthcare is the easiest thing to make look bad that there is. Because there's always a line drawn, there's always somebody on the wrong side of the line with a sad story to tell. And it's going to be quite a challenge to make that change.
Yeah, and this is one of so there's always someone getting the money. You know what I mean? And I think at this point, though, Americans are open. And the other thing I'll say, too, is that my plan is to have a robust public option, but I would not eliminate private insurers. I think if you do a good enough job with the public option, then a lot of the private insurers stop existing. But there would be private insurers that still are able to compete and add value in various ways. So you're right that America right now is going to have a hard time with certain structural changes because there are always going to be winners and losers. And the losers, in this case, are going to have a lot of money and a big megaphone and say, like, hey, like, this change is really bad for America. It's one reason why this freedom dividend I'm suggesting is, to me, so vital, is that we need to help ourselves make massive adjustments. And there's going to be right now, if we do nothing, there's going to be widespread change on a level that's catastrophic. I mean, the numbers I was using were like 3.5 million truck drivers, 5 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that need the truckers to get out and have a meal. You know, when the trucks don't stop anymore, like, you know, what happens to all those communities? The reason I'm running for president, I can see clear as day that the winner-take-all economy is about to, like, accelerate to places that we have never even imagined. So we need to make adjustments. But adjustments themselves are also quite painful. So if you have $1,000 a month going into people's hands, the adjustment's going to be a lot easier for a lot of people in every direction. And that includes sometimes lifting out costs, because like you said, at this point we're probably wasting 1 out of every $10 on an inefficient healthcare system that's not actually improving our health. That's it.
How do you plan on getting your more progressive policies through a divided, dysfunctional U.S. Congress?
All right, so I want you all to see this vision with me, and it's so fun. So all right, so right now I'm the internet candidate. The internet has me at 14% chance to win the nomination. I'm 5th right now. I'm behind, Bernie, Biden, Beto, and Kamala, and then there's me. All right. Now, what does the internet know that the polls do not know? Because I'm not polling at 14%, but the internet has me at a 14% chance to win. And the reason why the internet has me at such a high position is that no one knows my ceiling. Other candidates, you look at it and you say, like, I kind of know where that support tops out. But I'm getting thousands of independents and conservatives and people who voted for Donald Trump. I had several people on this trip alone say that they're switching party affiliation just to vote for me and support me in this election. So let's say that Andrew Yang shocks the world. I'm president in 2021. And the Democrats and progressives will be like, well, I want to work with a new Democratic president. And then first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get money into people's hands, because that's the dividend. And we all know if the anonymous Asian man who wants to give everyone money becomes president, the first thing he's going to do is try and give people some money. And so then the Republicans and conservatives are going to look up and say, like, wait a minute, he's talking about a massive transfer to rural areas, to red states on the interior. Like, our people win big from this plan. And I don't need 80% of Congress. I only need 51% to make this a law. It's just like, this isn't like a super majority situation. Plus, I'm president. All I need is a majority to sign this thing. So then after we make this happen, then the American people will be like, oh my gosh, our government got something right. Our government did something that actually improved our lives. And then be like, yes, we did. Now, what else can we get done? Infrastructure. And then you can start doing things. You start with the things that people will get unified and excited about. And then you start, moving some priorities across the finish line. But that's how it starts.
The opposite of Trump. You want to bring us together, not divide our government.
The opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math.
Anybody else?
What's your stance on the Cuban embargo, and do you have any plans to change it?
I think the Cuban embargo is, at this point, woefully out of date, and I would change it. At this point, like, what are we doing? We're embargoing this, like...
We're persecuting people that have done nothing to us.
Yes, there's a lot of that going on. Like, we're doing... I would make Puerto Rico a state. That's, like, long overdue. I got married in Puerto Rico. I love Puerto Rico. So yeah, the Cuban embargo, like that's like a relic to like bygone days.
But not to the Cubans.
Yeah, exactly. It's a relic that we can just say, look, like, why are we still like implementing a policy that we put in place decades ago? It doesn't make any sense.
Thank you.
One of the things that draws for President Trump when people to elect him was that he was kind of like saying, I'm going to go down there, I'm this outsider, I'm going to bring all these other business people in the room, and we're going to fix this stuff. And I think there was some, there was an allure to that. Like, because people don't have this faith in Washington. The same faith we're putting in you is kind of the same faith that maybe some other people put in Donald Trump. So, are there more of you? Like, can you bring more of you to Washington to work? Are there people that say, Andrew, you get in, I'm coming?
Oh yeah. I have this whole
Bring us.
Sure. I have this whole tribe of people that want to do this, but I want to say like two things. First, running government like a business actually would not work, because I've run businesses and I've been the CEO, and when I say to do something, people do it because I'm paying them, and if they don't do it, then there's a massive problem. So like you say, hey, we're going to go this way, then I was like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing. You say that as president, it won't work. And so as president, your job is to set a vision and say, look, we need to rally around this vision, and then if we can make this happen, then it's going to help like more and more Americans, and you have to like persuade, build relationships, like consensus build. It's just a different process. Now that said, are there things that we can do in the government that that my friends in business would love to get done? Like, yes. And one example I would use is this. Tax day is something we all hate and dread. And if you were a business and you were getting hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue from tens of millions of customers, you'd be thanking them like, like nobody's business. You'd be like, oh my gosh, we get all this money, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make tax day a national holiday. I'm going to call it revenue day. I'm going to have AI pre-fill out your taxes for you to the extent it can, because 80% of Americans have very simple taxes that are just like the last year's taxes, instead of having you all do these chores. And then there'll be a thank you video with Tom Hanks and Oprah. and then we're gonna tell you where your money went. And then we'll have government employees thanking you. And then you can elect where to send 1% of your taxes. You have like a whole array of programs. You'll be like, I'm gonna send it to that because I really like the US Forest Service. And then you'll have another video being like, thank you for supporting that. And then I'm gonna bring a family from every state in the country to celebrate Revenue Day at the White House, and then instead of dreading tax day like this stupid chore, like you actually look up and say like, hey, government's doing some decent things. Like, I don't hate this as much, and I got a day off. I got to play with my kids. Like, so that would be a basic business principle, which is just don't treat customers like crap. So that's something we can do. And I do have business friends who would come in, and we'd love to clean up some of the inefficiencies in government. And this is not something most Democrats talk about, but there are epic inefficiencies in a government that's literally like trillions of dollars and like has like employees. And the employee pattern in government does not follow the same pattern in industry. Where like in industry, if you have a technology that can streamline something, then like the department shrinks. In the government, that never happens. And unfortunately, at this point, we have to own it. It's like, look, like we have to hold our government to some kind of standard that we hold our people to. You can't have the government be like this protected fortress that no one questions what's going on.
Carly's giving us the high sign, so one more.
How do you feel about U.S. foreign policy the past couple decades and these regime change
in 30
wars
seconds.
we've been having for the past, like I said, couple decades, whether it's Libya or Venezuela or whatever?
Well, my general stance on this is that we should be very, very leery about having any sort of regime change that like we're somehow the decision maker on. Like it is not the U.S.'s position to decide who is in power in any given country. And when we've done that, our record has been uneven at best and poor at worst. So we have to help others determine their own. Like in Venezuela, obviously, if there's any kind of humanitarian aid or intervention we can have a positive impact in, that I would be all for it. I'd be thrilled. And even going so far as to recognize a certain group of leaders and say, look, like that's who we believe are like the rightful leaders of the country. But sending troops in with weapons to say like this is who runs this country is something I would be staunchly against in just about every situation.
One thing is clear, and having watched your Joe Rogan interview, is that the more people listen to you, including people here, the more you make sense to them.
Oh, thank you.
And but when you're on the debate stage and Chris Wallace is saying, okay, Andrew Wang, tell us your big plan in 32 seconds, how are you going to do that?
Well, I'll say I'm going to make this economy work for us, the owners and citizens of this country, instead of the mountains of capital it currently serves.
Okay, we got to wrap it up. Thank you, guys.